rendering,
sharpening.
You know, I have to stop myself every time from not turning my chair. Well, hello. I didn't see you there. That's one of the most cliched things ever, but it's always funny. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite, I guess, is it endemic podcast? I don't know what they're calling it now.
Sneaky
links. That's what the kids call cheating on people these days. They call it a sneaky link. I don't know if you heard about that. Sneaky link. Yeah, that's a thing.
Keep the alliteration. Post-pandemic, pencil to pencil.
Oh, I like that. That's a lot of P's. But you know, we've also been trying to curate the brand a little bit because we're not really podcasting like we were at the beginning of this. So I think live stream is a better way of putting a bomb on the wound here. So welcome to Pencil to Pencil. This is a live stream every Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST. Expert cartoonists come to you live, and we that's right, even you, Mike. And we chop it up really nice, and you may learn something before you're done. Let me do some introductions, guys. My name is JAMAR NICHOLAS. I am in the traditional book space called an author illustrator. I have a book series at Scholastic on the graphics imprint. Leon the Extraordinary is in stores now. The next book in the series will be out this time next year. I would be remiss if I did not bring you the tail of the tape. I'm not going to put out his wingspan, weight, and height, but he is known as the world heavyweight champion of webcomics. That is Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Gentlemen, so good to see you. We should change the featherweight. Or
I love it. Steve, what do you do?
I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. It's also on Webtoons, at Tapas, at Go Comics. Every place you can find webcomics, you'll find The Middle Age. And then I also have begun creating TTRPG, role-playing game stuff for the world of the Middle Age. So if you like the comic, you want to bring that kind of silliness to your D&D games, you can do that now.
Wow.
Working on the latest book now called Death Dealing, which is a lot of fun. And check out my socials, etc. You can see it all there. Max, lovely to see you. But I think I would be remiss.
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Remiss?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
I would be grimace if I didn't introduce at Sour Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the masked marvel, the maestro of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hello, everyone.
Well, hello, Mike Manley. Mike Manley, what you got there in your hands there, sir?
I actually have two dailies that I'm auctioning off for a charity.
Well, that's gorgeous.
Through David Barry, Cy Barry's son. You can find his on Instagram and also on Facebook. It's a charity auction for Children's Hospital in, I think, Boston. So he asked me if I could put something in. So I do the Phantom. So here's and I always do them two up on a
beautiful.
So
Max Power says that's a banger, Mike Manley.
And also do Judge Parker, but I do that. I'm doing both digitally right now, just speed things up.
I love it. You know, we were talking a little bit in the green room about kind of transitioning from traditional to digital, and it seems like everybody's kind of like, I feel like everybody's doing digital at this point. I don't know, Steve, do you know any cartoonists that have not gone over to digital and so fashion at this point?
I can't think of any, unless it was, for original art. I mean, the whole idea that something, the one of a kind piece, there's still, exactly, a beautiful piece like that.
Commission. So,
yeah.
I'm still keeping all my chops, so I'm going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not saying that people are abandoning it whole hog, but I'm sure there's still a couple of people who are just like, you know what? I can never get the thing to do exactly what I wanted to do. But there's been such jumps in pen technology over the last decade.
Maybe someone like Jeremy Bastian, whose work is just so intricate and so, you want those pages of original artwork. There's something about digital would cheapen it, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. You guys, and what's up, JRD and Tom? We've got a fantastic show for you tonight. If this is your first time watching, well, hello, you're in for a treat. So let me give you the rules of the road here. So Mike, myself, and Steve do this show every week. Sometimes it's just us giving you news you can use, traditional comic book tips. Sometimes Mike does tutorials or workshops. Sometimes Steve and I jump in here. That's what's cool about having expert cartoonists to guide you through this. I read something somewhere about last week's episode. I think it was Steve Conley, who was like, you guys, that conversation with Rick Veitch was top tier. And the conversation was so great because it was coming from a place you don't normally see with this kind of stuff. Because how often do you get three other guys in the business to talk shop? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a really special thing. And I always kind of hammer that home because not a lot of people do the same thing we're doing. So you're looking at something special here tonight. If this is your first time with us, we stream live on Facebook. We have a Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel. I'm always pushing the YouTube like and subscribe, you guys. I'm trying to buy a hydrofoil in the next couple of years. So we got to get those numbers up.
Solid gold.
That's right, like Marilyn McCoo. If you're watching live, I would love for you guys to interact with us. If you have a question for our guests or ourselves, please put it in the chat. I have to give you a caveat. It may not get on. So try to give us something that, has weight and heft to it, and we'll try to get it on, but I can't guarantee it will. Mike, talk about Stephen DeSTEFANO. Why don't you?
Well, let's see. There's a lot to talk about with Stephen because he's been working in comics and animation for decades now, and he's worked on like all your favorite shows from Ren and Stimpy to Earthworm Jim, Superman, Batman, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Woody Woodpecker. He worked on, also worked on, I'm just looking at his Batman Brave and the Bold. Gosh, it's just like, it's endless. It's like every cartoon ever made. Samurai Jack, Primal, which he won a special Emmy for.
That's fantastic.
As a character designer.
Don't forget Mazin Man.
Amazing, right? And comics and Instant Piano, which actually was a sort of an inspiration for me to do my own Action Planet comics. But as well as he does fantastic Popeye licensing art. I mean, he's just a all around amazing draftsman and cartoonist, and it really just wonderful, charming artwork to look at. And it's funny because he and I have never actually met, although we have worked on several of the same productions. Me doing either storyboards, also character design sometimes, and Adventure Brothers. We worked on that together. So it's funny how you can be on a team in animation with someone and actually never physically met them. Although I also interviewed him back in draw number 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And Bill Ray actually collaborated on the cover, which I have.
You have that in the studio. Yeah, that's a great cover. Yeah.
So without further ado, we should bring in the mighty DeSTEFANO.
I love it. Let's do it. Welcome to the stream. It's Hollywood magic.
Well, hello there.
Well, hello. How are you?
I didn't see you there. So nice to see you.
We need a prop newspaper to just pop a couple of times. Well, hello.
Yeah.
Stephen, welcome so much. Welcome to the live stream. Thanks so much for coming on. I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Mike, why don't you get us started? I'm going to interact with the chat. We'll see what's going on over there.
Why don't you give us a little bit of your, and we always talk about the origin, but also the origin of how you went from working in comics to working in animation, which is not sort of a normal thing, especially for East Coast guys, maybe West Coast guys, but not as much East Coast guys.
Yeah. Well, the origin. I as you know, I worked at DC Comics, and I started there when I was, this is going way back, this is a long story, but I started there when I was 15. And, I assumed I would draw superheroes, and suddenly, like, I find myself drawing a humor book. And that's the completely wrong place to draw humor. But, it was just what I was drawn to. I was like, I had to draw humor. And so, Bugs Bunny was in my veins, Popeye was in my veins. And so it seemed natural that eventually I would end up in animation. Once my DC Comics work dried up, I started working for Disney Comics, and then I started, I kind of say those are my college years, because that's when I really started to understand the theories of drawing. And because you had to for Disney. And so from that, I just started to draw more animated type characters. It was always in my veins, but it only started coming out at that point. And to bring Bill Ray back into the conversation, Bill figures a lot in my story, I think. I knew Bill from DC Comics. And one day I met him up there in DC in the East Coast offices, as it was back then. And Bill said, I'm in the West Coast. I'm working on the show, Ren and Stimpy. And he's like, hey, you should apply. You should send your portfolio over. And I thought, that sounds interesting. I remembered the short, the Ren and Stimpy short, and I was just thought, I didn't think comics were going to be a going concern for me. I just didn't think I could make a living at it. And so, but I thought, everything pointed to animation for me. I sent in my portfolio, and, not too long afterwards, I found myself with a job at Spumco, drawing for John Kay. And that's pretty much it. I always, even then, I always thought of myself as a comics guy, but my resume really kind of like it, just doesn't obey that. My resume really points all points to animation, really.
So now, did you go from New York to work at Spumco?
Yeah, that was part of the package. Like, I had to move to the West Coast, and I had a car. And back then you needed a car to live on the West Coast, to live in Los Angeles. And I thought, like a young person, I thought, well, that would be weird. Wouldn't that be weird to live in Los Angeles, to move 3,000 miles away from where I grew up in New York City? So, it was weird enough. I had a going conversation at the time with my instant piano mate, Robbie Bush. Robbie was the first one who wanted to move to Los Angeles. He wanted to go to study film. He wanted to be a filmmaker. And, these were in between instant piano conversations in the East Coast. And he's, he'd be like, dude, we should just move to Los Angeles. Dude, let's move to Los Angeles. And I'd be like, no, I'm never moving to Los Angeles. And he said, dude, come on, we have to move to Los Angeles. I said, no, man, like, he's like, what is it going to take for you to move to Los Angeles? I said, if you buy me a monkey, I'll move to Los Angeles. And then shortly after that, I got offered a job in Los Angeles, and I was like, dude, I got a job in Los Angeles. So I was the first one. I followed Kyle Baker, actually. Kyle was the Kyle was the first to live in Los Angeles. Mark Badger was the first to live in California. He moved to the Oakland area, the Bay Area. So we all ended up in LA, funny enough, except for Evan Dorkin, actually. So yeah, so I moved and I got used to it for about 3 years.
And then, and now you still work for Hollywood, but you are back in New York. So do you make trips?
I haven't been to Los Angeles, gosh, in about 4 years. Fate intervened with some germs and stuff. But I used to travel back to LA pretty regularly. You know, I would always say I love Los Angeles. I just don't want to live there. Have any of you ever lived there? Do you live there currently, or?
No, when I was on staff at Warner Brothers working on Superman, Batman, I almost moved. I was actually, pricing houses and everything, but then I ended up deciding that I didn't want to go because I didn't want to have to drive into the studio every day. I liked working. I loved working on that stuff, but I liked not having to commute. I'd hear all these horror stories of people that had to commute, 90 minutes, 2 hours a day before work and after work. So like after your work day is like in a car. So.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite thing. I wasn't crazy about driving. And as far as working went, I really, because I started my career working out of my basement and spent most of my career up to that point working out of my basement, that to go to a studio was really disorienting. I did not know how to draw around other people. And my however many, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it was at Spumco didn't go well anyway. So it was just super weird for me to go into a studio. And then when the show was reshuffled and brought fully to Nickelodeon, I came back, but I said, I'll only work in house 2 days a week. And they were like, sure, whatever, fine. And those 2 days a week were me bullshitting, basically, because growing up at DC Comics, you would go to deliver your work and then you would bullshit. You would sit in the editor's office and you would joke for until it was time to go drink, but in this case it was, I always assumed like if you were around people it was just to chat. And so I would go into games, as it was known then, Nickelodeon Animation, and I would bullshit for 2 days, and then I would go home and I would draw. And I don't think we all had problems meeting deadlines, but I wasn't terrible as far as that was concerned. I met my deadlines. It was just like that was part of my process. I just had to go bullshit, and then I would go home and work furiously.
Yeah, I guess that's another thing that it's really different about comics and animation is that comic is mostly guys like us sitting in a room like this by ourselves 8, 9, 10, 12 plus hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. And in animation, you get up, have your coffee or whatever, you go into like a factory where there's all these other artists and their personalities either work or don't work or whatever. And it's really very different. And I think that people who work in comics don't really realize that.
Yeah, it was a real education. It was a big change. So yeah, I haven't worked in a studio, worked in-house since the Venture Brothers. So we're talking like 15 years ago about. But I don't know. It's so, whatever you don't do is mysterious and difficult to you. But I know a lot of people who are so used to working at a studio, so used to working. I mean, the pandemic wreaked so much havoc that, but that was one of the things. It's like a lot of people were just not used to working at home. I know a lot of people here in New York that do other types of business. They're just, if they're at home, they're at a loss. They don't know what to do. But it was part of the discipline of being a comic book artist. Is you didn't work, you didn't get paid, so you had to work.
Right. I'm sort of also really interested in your development, because you're saying you were talking about, doing superhero stuff, but then you had this love and this obvious passion for doing the cartoony or animated stuff. And then, like, what was your process of education? Because it's one thing to be a fan of, say, Chuck Jones or Maurice Noble or Disney, and then each one of those styles sort of has a set of rules. I mean, there's a generic squash and stretch, straight against curves, and stuff we all learned from the Preston Blair book, that kind of stuff. But since you didn't go to CalArts or you didn't go to an animation school, I'm really interested in the fact that you gained all this knowledge because you're very stylistically flexible. And that's also something that's probably a little bit more common, let's say, in animation than in comics, because you might work on one show, got to pivot. And I mean, resume is like nothing but pivots, but I mean, all like really top-notch drawing stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. I'll have to think about that. As you said, I didn't go to CalArts or any art school. I did go to 1 year of the high school art and design here in New York City, but otherwise I didn't have I had no formal drawing education. That's why I said Disney was my college, because it sort of forced me to learn how to draw correctly. But but I don't know. The way I learned to draw was to just draw like everybody else. I loved, the Holy Trinity to me is Popeye, Bugs Bunny, and Batman. Those are the three best cartoon characters I can think of. And I do think of Batman as a cartoon character. Nobody at DC Comics when I was a kid ever thought of Batman as a cartoon character. I thought of Batman as a cartoon character because he's ridiculous and he's great. And so I just always tried to, know how to draw Batman. And I always just tried to draw Bugs Bunny and Popeye. They were all the same thing to me. And the learning process was I was just lucky that I got work because I had to get better. And when you work with really good people, you get better. So I had the fortune to work with some really, really good people. And it was sink or swim. I had to learn. And I'm still learning. I don't know. I've been looking at a lot of my drawings lately, and I'm aghast at what I see. But I got work to do, so there's no time to be aghast too much. But yeah, that was my learning process. I always it benefited me to know how to draw Batman and Bugs Bunny. Like you said, Mike, I could get work on either or. To this day, I think Genndy thinks of me as an action adventure guy, which I find hilarious because action adventure guys do not find me to be an action adventure guy. But to Genndy, I'm like the guy to go to if he wants to do, or one of the guys, I should say, if he wants to do an action adventure kind of thing. That's how he thinks of me. And I think it's because, I could get a board from him. You might recognize this, Mike, where I'm like, oh, he's doing like the Dark Phoenix saga. Mm. And I'd say that to him. He's like, yeah, that's right. I'd be like, oh, you're doing like, Michael Golden and the, in the Micronauts. He'd be like, yeah, that's right. Because not very many people at CalArts knew what this stuff was. Yeah. But I read all the comics that he did. So therefore he tends to associate me a lot with Marvel Comics. It strikes me as hilarious, but again, that's good for me. I'll take that job.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I worked on that. He had me work on that one Samurai Jack which was loosely inspired by that Walt Simonson issue of Thor with the old Norse guy who had to die in battle in order to go to Valhalla.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a time too where there were guys like you and me and Blevins and a few other people that were coming in from comics, transitioning in the 90s into animation. So that brought another worldview, because we didn't just like Bugs Bunny, we also like Jack Kirby, and we like, you know, Neil Adams and Frank Frazetta, and it brought this other element into it. Yeah, so I think it's funny to see how common artists of a certain generation all have the same touchstones, all have the same influences, you know.
Yeah.
Like Genndy's, you know, right around our age, so we were all reading that same stuff.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing Symbionic Titan for Genndy, it just turned out in my head to be what I thought Genndy was doing with his boards was he was doing anime, but definitely Tezuka was on his mind. And then his line just reminded me so much of Walt Simonson. And I was doing it so much. And one day on Facebook, I don't really know Walt, but I pinged him because we're friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, I'm doing this thing. It's kind of like Tezuka meets you. And he wrote, LOL, how's that going for you? I was like, it was going okay. I thought it worked, but yeah, it's, you know, it's good to wear a lot of hats. And I think comic book guys are probably, you know, well, that's one of the things that got me embedded at Ren and Stimpy when I first showed up. You know, I was hired as a storyboard artist. That's what I know I was hired as. But when I got there, they told me we don't need any storyboard artists. You know, what we need is a background designer. Can you draw backgrounds?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, yeah, I can draw backgrounds. I mean, who can't draw backgrounds? And so, you know, I was the background designer for, you know, my first couple seasons on Ren and Stimpy. You know, it was shortly after that I discovered that to be a background designer was to be lowly. You know, it was like nobody wanted to draw backgrounds. It was like that was a chump's job. Everybody wanted to draw characters. But I thought it was great. I loved drawing backgrounds. You know, it's, you know, it was my comic book education that taught me to, you got to draw everything. You just have to, you know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You got to draw a building. You got to draw a building. You got to draw a tree. You got to draw a tree. And that's what you do.
Stephen, I have a question for you, kind of along those lines. As I was going to ask you a little earlier about when you first started kind of going in house, if you had any kind of, I don't know, reservations about being in a system like that, and you know, was there a point where you were a little bit of a fish out of water, like, well, holy shit, what do they want me to do now? Versus to what you're saying now, it's like, yeah, whatever you need, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. Spumco was a strange education too. It's weird that it was my introduction to studio life, and it was a weird studio. it was a really weird. It like was built on an Indian burial ground. I'm telling you. So I was definitely a fish out of water. I didn't you know, I didn't know how to work in house. I didn't know how to navigate stuff. I remember, you know, even like months later saying to a line producer, like, yeah, you're like a PA, right? And, you know, she was mortified that I thought she was a production assistant.
Right.
But I just didn't know shit from Shinola, for lack of a better term.
Did you find somebody there that kind of like helped you along, or did you just have to figure it all out?
There were a lot of, you know, really, I mean, Bill Ray was there, and so Bill was extremely helpful. Bill was a tremendous help. My first, eventually I was put into character layout, and my supervisor on that was a guy named Mike Fontanelli. Excuse me. And Mike, not only was he from New York and from Long Island, he was, he was a good teacher. He's a great cartoonist. He is a great cartoonist. And so I learned a lot from him. And I learned a lot from, I didn't learn a lot from John. I can say that. That's the only thing I can say. I learned a lot from Bob Camp. John I was too uncomfortable around John to learn anything from him. But everybody else, it was a weird studio. It was a very intense vibe. But everybody, as far as drawing went, everybody was really, really supportive. And eventually my favorite cartoonist there is a guy named Chris Riccardi, who's sadly no longer with us. And I knew I'd arrived when I was a board artist, and a couple years later Chris was looking through my stuff. He was, I just walked into my office and there he was going through stuff on my desk, as we did. And he said, "Oh, hey," he said, and he walks past me. And he goes, "When did you get so good?" And he walked out. And I thought, oh, I guess, I guess I'd gotten better. I guess I'd arrived. So yeah, it was a difficult transition for a lot of reasons.
Well, and maybe a follow up to that is, can you talk about transitioning from all those other roles into boards? Because like those are two kind of different languages. Did you jump to that easily, or how was that?
Yeah, it was easy, and my first board was crap. It was total shit. It was garbage. I knew what I knew from comics. I learned a bit about the technical end of storyboarding. I'd worked with some as a background artist, so I got used to what I was supposed to be looking at.
Yeah.
And so I learned the technical stuff, but after a while, I didn't. As I did my first storyboard, and I had this mentality, that's not helpful if you work in animation. I just want to do it myself. If I do, because Bill Ray kept saying like, "Oh, let me look. What are you doing? I'll help you." And I was like, no, I just want to get it done. And I showed it, and it was just terrible. It was so. I think what I was going to say is I learned the technique. The drawing was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't very good actually. But as far as telling the story and the jokes, it was awful. So, and it was after that when I started to show Bill my work and get feedback from people before I actually showed it to the director. That's when I started getting better. I mean, that's another learning curve from comics to animation, is that you're so used to being by yourself in comics.
Yeah.
You're everything to the art. And at least the story part, and a lot of the look, and to go from that where you're everything to go into a system where you're a part of a team, that was a big change for me. That was difficult.
Yeah, and to be aware of the fact that the whole thing is always liquid until they actually send it out of the building to be animated. I mean, they're still making changes, redrawing things, redoing things right until the very end. Where comics, you kind of like work on it, done. You send it in, and very rarely, as you know, do you ever go back and you make any change on anything. But in
Right.
animation, I mean, I was talking about this the other day. And I worked on, several Samurai Jacks, and then there was one that I turned in because Genndy would sort of give you a plot and then you kind of run with it. And he had these characters that were sort of like, one was like a transformer, one was like Tundro, one was like a guy with like mental powers, and they were hunting Samurai Jack. And then I see the cartoon, and it's all those characters are gone. completely changed all this. Like the beginning of it is right from my board, but then there's all this other stuff that's like, whoa, like, you know, because we had a back and forth where you rough out your board, you send it in, the director looks at it, makes their suggestions, you go and you finish your board and you send it in. Now, I guess they also have, there was like no storyboard correction. I guess the director in that time would do the storyboard corrections. They don't have like a legion of people that just do storyboard corrections like that now. So it was really like, whoa, like all that work just gone, you know, just completely changed. And you have to be able to deal with that too, of the fact that you're not the, you know, when Jack Kirby turned in a comic, that was it.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're the director on a show, nothing you turn in is permanent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people can't. Some people have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm no longer a board artist. Why I feel like in design, particularly if you're going to do what they call special poses, that used to be character layout. Now it's special poses. You can control to a degree, what's going to appear on screen. And I'm a comic book guy. Everything to me is the final drawing. That's why I still think of myself as a comic book guy, because I think of the image. I don't necessarily think of the sequence or the filmic quality of something. I want a really good drawing. And so, yeah, that's where my mind goes. And I felt like, well, that's something I kind of have control with, to the, even at this point, to the degree of what the line weight might appear to be on a final drawing of a character on screen. That feels better to me. There are a lot of other reasons why I'm not. There were a few other reasons why I'm not a storyboard artist anymore, but I love design, and I realized like that's where that's kind of always probably where my strength was anyway.
Well, I'm sort of still really interested in your process of learning what I would call the canon of design. So if you look at Suzuka, you can see how he was influenced by the Fleischers and how the Fleischers were influenced by Disney. So if you go back to like the Katzenjammer Kids, you go back through the beginning of comic strips into film, cartoons, through comic books, and everybody's sort of following this, like sort of like picking up the baton from a previous success or popular idea. So since you're self-taught, and I'm like you, I'm self-taught, I'm sort of interested in like when you started to say, I'm linking these principles of design, which kind of, irrespective of style, still carry through. Because I think when I see a lot of younger artists do character design, one of the weaknesses is they don't have a solid foundation on some of that canon, because they're not linking the history. And I see that when I look at your drawings. I can see this stuff.
Yeah, but keep in mind, I'm old, so or I'm older than those people. We're at this point. We're talking about to a lot of the younger designers, we're talking ancient history. So it's funny that you mentioned the Katzenjammers and Fleischers, and it's all the same thing to me. It's all certain design theories, but they all kind of flow together. You're absolutely right. And for a long time, I billed myself as a traditional. This is what I called myself. If anybody asked, I would say I'm a traditional American cartoonist, meaning that yes, from everything from the Cats and Jammers, Happy Hooligan, up to, you know, Bullwinkle. This should be this, or maybe even later, Hong Kong Phooey, maybe. You know, this is my canon. This is the stuff that I understand extremely, or you know, I'd like to say that I understand extremely well. And then anything after that, I might be iffy on. But you know, it's all there. It's all there. You know, the drawing principles. You can draw anything, and I was really interested in how you drew a character well. That was really important to me. And you know, you go back to you know, Dirks or Nair or Opper or Harriman, and those guys knew how to draw like crazy. I mean, they just knew how to draw. I wish I had the 10th of their knowledge. They floor me every time because, you know, they not only do they you know how to draw the principles of drawing, they know how to bend it, they know how to abstract it, they knew how to get something personal and strange out of the very basic drawing principles. So,
Stephen, I'm gonna put your Insta on the screen if that's cool.
Oh, sure.
All right. And also, I hope I didn't cut you off, Stephen, but
Oh, no.
we have a laundry list of questions in the chat. So we've just been putting little stars on them, and maybe we'll start here. Our good friend Roger Ash asks, "Hey Roger, how are you? How did Stephen start working with Genndy? Do you have a story for us with that?"
Yeah. Yes. Well, you know, Genndy went to CalArts with a lot of the people that I was working with at Ren and Stimpy. So as Genndy kind of came up in the business, by that point I'd moved back to New York. But you know, oh, okay, he's doing this Dexter thing. Oh, okay, he's doing this Samurai Jack thing. And then again, my friend Robbie from Instant Piano, he was writing some of these licensed comics, some of these Cartoon Network comics for Joan Hilty at DC Comics. She was helming all the Cartoon Network books, and so Robbie wrote an issue or two of Dexter's Lab, and he asked if I would do them, and Joan asked if I would do them. And I did one, and I guess Genndy liked that, and I did a second one, and Genndy, to this day, talks a lot about that one. He really seemed to like that one. So that was kind of this, and then after that, we got in touch, you know, and by the time that, I think the first thing I actually did for Genndy was, directly for Genndy, was 15 years ago, he had an idea that he was pitching to Cartoon Network called Unicorn, and he had a rough storyboard. It was all in pencil back then, and he said, "Can you clean this up?" And I cleaned it up, and then 15 years later, it's finally on the air. If you want to see it, that's so Genndy. If you want to see it, it's on HBO Max right now and Adult Swim. But that's how I started working for Genndy. And then immediately after that, like, you know, Craig Kelman must have not been, or Paul Rudish must have not been available, because he's like, "Could you design Symbionic Titan?" And I'm like, "Oh, sure." So, and that was the beginning of me really working for Genndy.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
That's a very long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
Great.
Thanks. Well, there's a couple other questions about Symbionic Titan and also about Unicorn, but I'm gonna bring your art onto the page, and well, maybe we can discuss some of that.
I just read the other day that Genndy said that he wants to try to bring back Symbionic Titan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I read that somewhere on the interwebs. That
oh, that's cool. I wouldn't be surprised. I kept saying to him, you know, you got like Dexter, and you got Samurai Jack, you got Symbionic Titan, you got, like, why don't you do like a whole Genndy verse? And he said, "Shut up." I was like, I surprised. Like I thought he'd go for like the whole universe thing, and he's like, "That's lame." Like really? Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to cycle through, and you don't really have to touch on everything, but I just wanted to show a little bit of your style here.
Well, I'm really interested in your cleanups over Genndy's drawings because you mentioned the other artists too. Everybody sort of brings something a little bit different when you go over his stuff. You go over his work, and this stuff seems very influenced, or it looks very sort of Fleischer to me.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys talked about? Did he pull up things? Did he say, this? Look at this.
No, not by that point. Genndy thinks of me as his action adventure guy, and I think he thinks of me as his Tezuka Fleischer guy. So the unicorn largely, even back 15 years ago, unicorn was very round and Tezuka-like. And I jumped on that, and he liked that when I was, even back then when I was cleaning up the boards. A lot of unicorn comes from Popeye. When Genndy and I were working on the Popeye movie, I first found out about the Popeye movie. He said, "I'm going to do a Popeye movie. I want it to look exactly like you draw Popeye." And I was like, "Whoa, that sounds awesome." And so we worked on it for like 2 minutes, and then it was killed. But, just like Genndy 15 years later picked up Unicorn, he doesn't let anything go. There's nothing in Gendy's memory banks that's lost. So there were a few characters from that that were drawn for Popeye that actually made it into Unicorn. I didn't put them there. Genndy put them there. He actually pulled them from the files and he plopped them into the board because he liked them so much. But yeah, it's very Fleischer-esque. If you're European, people keep saying like, "I love your Asterix take," and I'm like, I'm not doing Asterix, but I get what you're saying. I'm not trying to diss Asterix. It's just
I always think that they're if I could go back in a time machine, it would be really interesting in the 20s and the 30s when animation was really starting to come up. Newspapers were expanding. Everywhere around the world, all these cartoonists who later became giants in the field were all reading the same material, internalizing these same ideas, and then you sort of see each, you could see Asterix, you could see how you could say, oh, okay, yeah, the sort of the knobby elbows and the big feet, the big hands, sort of something will be really skinny and then something will be real fat.
Yeah.
You can see you see the French really seem to do that a lot. There seemed to be a lot of that from Lucky Luke and all of those. So I'm really interested in that sort of common, like iconic language of shape that you see people using that is just so appealing, which is why I think people still sort of want to go back to that.
Yeah. In my head, I love that stuff. That stuff is so great. I didn't grow up with it, so it's not in my DNA. But to me, every time I look at the little bellhop character Spirou, it's like a direct link to Dagwood and Blondie. It's so 1930s comic strip. It's just that it's been updated. It's so beautiful. I can't do something that beautiful, but it's really great. I love that stuff. But the Fleischers is in my bones.
Do you think so? When you came home as a kid from school, did you see Popeye like every day on TV? Was that just something that grabbed you?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Popeye was really important to me. And I loved, the Fleischers were better than the famous studios. I recognized that when I was a kid, but I still, if it was Popeye, it was Popeye. It was great. I just loved it. So yeah, to see a great Popeye cartoon was the best.
So now, did you look at the strip, because the early, the Seeger stuff is kind of weird, almost like Robert Crumb or something. It's a very strange. To me, when I see it now, it looks foreign. It doesn't look. The cartoons look very American.
Yeah.
Sometimes to me, when I look at the strip, it seems like everyone's from a foreign country.
Oh, gee, I like that. Actually, now I have more of an appreciation for Cigar. Yeah, Cigar, I only knew it was a cartoon. There was a book called All in Color for a Dime, if you remember that.
Yep.
I bought it as a paperback when I was a kid. It was still an old book back then. When I was a kid, I bought it, and there's an article in there called "The First Arf Superhero," and I'm like, oh, is it Little Orphan Annie? Because for some reason I knew Little Orphan Annie, but not Cigar's Popeye. And so I'm looking at these Popeye drawings. I'm like, well, is this like a mad parody or something? I don't understand, because Popeye's a cartoon. I don't know what these drawings are. And yeah, that's how I found out that Popeye was in the comic strips, and I didn't know more about him until Fantagraphics started republishing it, and that's when I started buying Popeye. That's when I really got into the comic strip. That's how I learned that it was a comic strip. So that's my Popeye education.
Yeah, my dad would tell me about Popeye when I was a little kid, and then he would also mention like Eugene the Jeep, which you don't really see in the cartoons, like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, who is that? Because I don't see that in the the cartoons I would watch after school every day. So it's funny because there now you can find reprints of anything you want. It's like it's the glorious time if you're a fan of the last 100 years of cartooning. You could find there's always somebody like scanning in something old now. It's just amazing.
Yeah. I used to before that, about maybe 20 years ago, there was a guy. There probably still are people on eBay who would have clippings of whole continuities of strips. I learned about so many strips that way. I was just continuously buying these stack of comic strips. I was just continuously reading that stuff. And nowadays you Google it and then it's there.
I'm also interested in like when you started becoming aware of the like Tezuka and things like that, where and I guess living in New York, you had Forbidden Planet, you had these places that did have some imports probably earlier on than a lot of other places.
Yeah, I didn't get any. Tezuka for me was like, it was cartoons. It was Kimba the White Lion. That's what I knew. That was my introduction to that. I didn't get. I can't tell you the first Tezuka comic I got. I don't even know, and I'm not even sure. I actually might have been in my 20s. I think I bought one, and it wasn't even translated. It must have been at Forbidden Planet. But the first opportunity I got to read it, I didn't actually. It wasn't hitting me. Now it definitely does, but back then, it's like a lot of things. You have to wait. You have to sit with something until like it starts making sense to you. My favorite story about that, I'll go back to Robbie. I'm mentioning Robbie a lot. He's gonna get a lot of money from this, I'm sure. But Robbie has the best story about that. This cracks me up every time. When he was a kid, and Robbie's a bit younger than me. He's a bit younger than all of us, but someone gave him New Gods #1, right? He gets it. It's in Mylar and stuff. He's like, whoa, I got New Gods #1. And he thinks, this is too special. I can't deal with this right now. So he puts it in his night table drawer and he doesn't look at it for like years, because it was too intense. It was like, that's not for me yet. I'm gonna have to grow up a little bit. I'm gonna have to reach for that. And then someday maybe I'll be worthy of New Gods #1. And eventually, I think Robbie has a bigger Kirby collection than I do. So, but he's worthy. Now he's worthy.
That's fantastic. One of our regulars in the chat, James, just commented on Cuphead, and that has to be in your wheelhouse. Cuphead.
Okay. Yeah, Cuphead. I was lucky to get to draw some Cuphead. Those specific drawings before. There is a Monopoly game. There's a Cuphead Monopoly game, and all the art is mine. The entire I drew all the art for that.
Wow.
And I drew the cover as well. They're lovely people to work with. They're they're Canadian, so they're just so pleasant and nice.
Yeah, here it's a very small group. It's like a couple people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. They're really, really nice. I worked on the very first Netflix episode, but that didn't go too well. So
what were you doing? Were you doing like draw-overs of like special character poses?
For Cuphead, for the Netflix?
Cuphead,
yeah. I was doing. Yeah, I was. I did some rotations, and I did. I think I designed that whole first episode. Yeah, I was working from the board. I was the character designer on that episode, and then some really amazing people came in after that, and killed it. But it looked great. But yeah, Cuphead is definitely, it's like, again, it's one of those things just flows out of me. Those people, what is the place? Studio MDHR? Yeah, they were great because they were like, just draw it the way you would draw it. And I love, that's my favorite. That's the best when you get a job like that. Chris Duffy at Nickelodeon Magazine used to be like that too. That was really great. You could just draw it the way you wanted to draw it. And then I did a second thing for them. It was based on the TV show. And then I started to get notes. It's like, well, this doesn't look like it looks in the TV show. And can it look a little bit more like it looks in the TV show? And at that point I said, you know what? That's kind of not my thing at this point in my career.
Yeah.
I don't mind drawing on model as long as it's my model.
Right.
Um,
I shouldn't really say that, but I can draw on model. But
well, seeing all these different styles, is there a default? Like if you're on the phone and you got a pad in front of you, where do you naturally gravitate?
I crosshatch.
Do you really?
Yeah, if you're on the phone, like, yeah, I go right to crosshatching. Crosshatching is like my default. That's why a lot of my inks are so busy. But my default, is there any default on there? My default is probably close to, at the top, there's my Kurtzman-esque drawing, and that's close to it. My default is a combination of Floyd Gottfredson, Milt Gross, and Harvey Kurtzman.
Wow, lovely.
And it's a mess.
I see that degree for Frankenstein. That's fantastic.
Oh, thanks. That was fun to draw. That guy's a hell of a cartoonist. I really wish I could draw messy, Like Muggy Doo Boy Cat. That was great to draw because it's all just brush, and so much of what I do is hyper controlled. And I don't like that about. That's not one of my favorite things about the way I draw. I do try to loosen up, but my default is often pretty tight. So that was fun to draw. It was just a little more loose and brushy, because that's what Briefer did.
Yeah, those and I'm wondering if that stuff was large, because I know a lot of the old, before the mid '60s, the art were usually like twice up.
Yeah,
So those lines are big, like moving your whole arm when they're doing those strokes.
Yeah, we were talking about digital versus traditional drawing.
Yeah.
And that I remember the job that seemed to turn Genndy's head was this thing called Dexter's Arc, and I had this number 12 brush, and is that even big? I don't even remember. It seems big, right? And I was just bending into that thing, and it felt great. And you can't do that in Procreate. You can't just bend into a line. If you want to a bigger, at least as far as I know, somebody has a way that I can get a bigger line out of this. That'd be great. I mean, I try to work at a high DPI because I want it to look okay. If I worked at a lower DPI, the lines would be fatter, but they'd be crunchier. So I can't have that. So you can't bend into stuff. You're going to break your Apple Pencil.
Well, it's also this. It's also this as opposed to this.
Yeah, right.
Right, because we're working in an area. I mean, you can have a 30-inch Cintiq. You're still working in that little area.
Yeah. And then when I started working digitally in Photoshop, it was the weirdest thing. I would go to pixel size to see what was off. And that's not even a drawing. Then you're not drawing. You're looking at pixels. That's when my stuff really starting to stiffen up a lot.
Where it starts making light bright.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have ways of working to try to loosen up before? Do you sketch what I call meat world before you work digital to kind of get loose, or do you do any warm-ups? Because I know some guys do that, and other people just sit down and go.
Yeah, no, I just sit down and go. Some of I don't know what you fellas do, but some of the best draftsmen I know Kyle was certainly this way. I don't know if Mazzucchelli was. But they would do they would sketch continuously, just sketch all the time. And to me, well, that's work. Why would I do that? I'm not gonna, you want to pay me? I'll draw, but or if I want to do something for myself, I'll draw. But otherwise, no, I don't warm up. I just kind of go right at it. But there probably is a process of what I'll do first and how it'll come out, and there probably isn't built-in warm-up process. But no, I just usually kind of attack a drawing and I go right at it.
Now, what would you? Because everybody wants to be. Everybody wants to be a character designer. Every student wants to be a character designer because they think they're just going to sit down and just draw fun little characters all day, So maybe you can give, because you've been a character designer for a long time now, give a little bit of the lay of the land and maybe some pointers, because to be in the business as long as you have been, you also have to continue to grow. You can't ossify.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there some sort of rules of the road or some guidelines you might give to the young prospective character designers?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh man. You know, when I was younger, when I was starting, the the goal is to draw and to draw better, there were traditional rules. You tried to understand the rules, and then you tried to free yourself from those rules. I guess what I'm stalling about is, I look at a lot of what's done today, and I don't know that they need to know that stuff. Maybe they do. I would say that you should. I would say that that's good for you, because if we're talking about versatility, if we're talking strictly about getting work, then versatility means you're always going to get work. It means that you can change and turn on a dime and do whatever the job requires you to do. Now, I look at a lot of stuff online, and I look at a lot of portfolios, and I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing, and they're doing what is prevalent today. What my friend of mine called, like, everything's parallel lines. When I at Ren Stimpy, when I was learning, like, parallel lines are boring. Don't do that. Things should converge, or they should break apart, but they, don't do, like, if you're going to do tubes, it has to be funny. But everything is kind of like, everything's, from what I'm seeing, again, these are my opinions, but so I don't know what's going to get people hired for the rest of their life. My advice is always, I used to teach at SVA, School of Visual Arts, in New York City, and I always said, it's the best advice I could give is just work. It's always about the work. It's never about you. It's never about whether you're great, or it's just about, like, you just work and you just try and get better. I made the mistake, like, the first class I taught, I asked them why they were there, what they wanted out of it, and everybody said, "I want a show." And now, it's really hard for me to know. Maybe if, when I was 20, I thought the same way. I don't think so, but maybe I did. But talking with my friends, we're like, well, we just wanted to get better. We want two things: we wanted to get better, and we wanted to work. Yeah. We just wanted to work. And if we could get better along the way, that would be amazing. So I think technically the advice still stands. Just learn your craft, learn how to draw, and learn all the rules, and then bend them until they're close to breaking. But you got to learn the rules, otherwise you don't know what you're breaking.
So give us an example of some of the rules, because again, that's nebulous for young people, and a lot of young people love rules because they go, well, if I follow the rules,
right,
then I'm gonna, But if I follow the rules, that does not necessarily mean that I'm gonna get a DeSTEFANO drawing.
Right. So these are the rules.
Yeah.
For me, everything is construction and shape. You're looking for a character that won't necessarily rotate perfectly in 3 dimensions, but it'll look like it'll rotate perfectly in 3 dimensions. It should look like it has weight. It should look like it has mass. It should look like it has a skeleton beneath its quote unquote flesh. This way, anything that you want it to do, it's like an armature. You just put it in that position, And you do it because we're cartoonists. It can do it like 3 extra yards, which is amazing. That's why we have the best job on the planet. But you need to understand the structure. To make it interesting, you need to understand shape. My girlfriend still makes fun of me about this. I had a class, the last class I taught at SVA was my character design class. And I had a whole class built around big and little. And, you know, we went around the room saying, this is big and this is little. And at the end of it, I thought, what am I doing? That is so dumb. That is so stupid. But, you know, but it's about shape. It's about contrast. It's about like, well, if I make this big here and I make this little there, that's going to be a little more interesting than if the shapes are closer to each other. Right. You know, symmetry is not necessarily something to shoot for unless you're Stanley Kubrick. You're looking for contrasting shapes. You're looking for and interesting shapes. You're looking for things that go together well. Popeye is way too many interesting shapes. Popeye is a crazy looking character. Very difficult. I think he's difficult to draw. I don't know. He was very difficult for me to draw as a kid, but he's got a lot of shapes in there. And his body is so beautifully designed. His body has fantastic shapes. The big bulbous forearms, the massive fists, the tube body, the very long tube body going to a very short, stocky legs. That's just beautiful. It's beautiful because, first of all, because so many contrasting shapes and strange shapes. And funny shapes. Why are they funny? Because Popeye is supposed to be the strongest man on the planet, and he's built nothing like that. He doesn't look anything like you'd think the strongest man on the planet looks like. You know, his torso should not look like that if he's able to lift a house. But it does, and that's why it's funny. When you get up to Popeye's head, then things start to get a little weird and a little problematic. Because the chin and the head can throw you very, very easily. And then the chin looks a lot like the hat shape, and so that can be a problem. And he rotates really badly. That's why you almost very, very, very rarely ever see a front-on shot of Popeye, because he just looks bad that way. Although that's something Mickey Mouse shares with him. Mickey Mouse looks better 3/4 than he does front-on. So those are the rules.
I think it's sort of interesting too, because something like what Segar did was what I sort of think of as like a naive, funny way of drawing something that's just funny. He had a funny way of drawing that obviously was just sort of natural to him. And later on, they sort of took it and they sort of perfected. They took some of the oddness and the inconsistency out. Like if you learn the early Popeye and the later Popeye, and then you look at the Popeye now. But yeah, I mean, there's that way of drawing something that is completely wrong, but funny and charming. And that is an aspect of cartooning that some people naturally have that you can't program.
Yeah, I agree. I think to some extent, my success as a professional cartoonist has come down to I think I have an ability to create charming looking characters. And I try not to make that mean that they're saccharine looking characters, but you know, charm is a major part. You know, we should all be Freddie Moore. You know, we should all be able to draw that beautifully with that much charm. That's why he was so successful.
Right. And I mean, you look at a lot of cartoons now. They're what I call the stamp style, like the Family Guy style, where there really is. It's designed so that a machine can sort of like make it. There's no weirdness to it or oddness or really any, to me any charm. There's no charm in the line. There's really no charm in the shape. Everything is very sort of straight, and it's very easy because it's a writer's show, not an artist's show. That's something I would talk to my classes about too, is that every time a show like that is successful, they make more shows like that, which kind of hurts you in a way as if you're an artist, because they don't really need artists to make those shows.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So that goes along with everybody wants to sell their own show. And then you sort of explain, well, if you work for Cartoon Network for a long time and they get to know you, then maybe you pitch something after you worked for somebody else. You made them money. They're not just going to go, hey, kid, you in the back, let's make your show.
Yeah, although they might. I don't know. I feel like that's how we've gotten some of these things lately. But, you know, I would say you should just work at Cartoon Network for 10 years anyway, and then pitch a show. You know, there's nothing wrong. You know, if you make $1 million overnight, that's fantastic. But there's also nothing wrong with learning your craft for 10 years and living a good life. Maybe not making $1 million, but maybe just living comfortably. What's wrong with that? That was my goal. You know, there were my career. You know, after Ren and Stimpy ended, I stayed on for a little bit longer, and then I thought, well, I'm going home. I mean, I did what I wanted to do. I learned animation. I got contacts. I'll go home back to New York where I felt most comfortable, and I'm going to be a board artist. And I did. If I'd stayed, I always think my life would have been so much more different. I might have been a producer. I might have been a showrunner. I might have been a director at this point, as most of my friends became, and rightfully so. But, you know, that wasn't my path. That wasn't, I think, if I wanted to do it, then I would have done it. I clearly didn't want to do it. The most important thing to me was to come and live around the people I loved, and to continue to do the thing that I loved the most, which was to draw. You know, I haven't heard very many people talk about this, but I talk about it a lot. You know, there's a difference between being an artist and a showrunner. Like, it's, you know, you should be both probably, but, you know, to run a show, to be a director is a completely different art form. To be able to sell a show, Genndy is astounding, because Genndy will tell you he's a lousy draftsman, but he's not. He's a really good draftsman. Maybe he needs some polishing here and there, and that's why he has people like me around. But he's a good draftsman, and he's a good director, and he's a good manager. And I've seen him handle like ridiculous political arguments with studio heads. That's astounding. I mean, that's a quadruple threat or whatever. But you know, so they're all separate art forms, though. Being a politician, that's an art form. Being a showrunner, that's an art form. I was only ever good at one thing. I was only ever good at drawing cartoons. I was only ever good at drawing cartoon characters. But that's what I pursued. And yeah, to your point, Mike, yeah, to me, there were rules. There was this tradition. There was this really long tradition of cartooning. And I wanted to learn it as best I could, and I wanted to apply it.
Stephen, this is a perfect time for us to introduce. First, how are you feeling? I know we've been running it down. We're almost done.
No, I'm gonna duck and grab my seltzer for a second.
All right, cool. All right, I'll take you off screen, and then when we come back, we'll do. Oh, he didn't go that far. I thought you were going to like.
No.
Go to the West Wing or something like that.
Gotta go over there.
All right, so you wet your beak, and then Stephen, we're going to do ka-chow, lightning round. It's question palooza time.
Okay.
We've got a lot of people who have some questions, so I want to try to get some in before we run out of time.
Sure.
So what's going to happen? It's not a game show, but what's going to happen here? I'm going to just throw questions up on the screen and try to, if you have a nice, concise answer you can give, or you can embellish a little bit, but
just say splunge. Splunge, like that old Monty Python bit.
Yeah.
So let's start here. Eternity Forever, another lifer of the Pencil to Pencil crew, asks, was there much competition in the studio pitching ideas and boards, and how was that process with Genndy and Cartoon Network?
You know what? I'm not ideally suited to answer that question because I was always 3,000 miles away. I think there was probably a lot of backbiting and a lot of shouting. Yeah, I think so.
I love it. All right, thanks. All right, this is good. All right, Michael Howard. Hello, Michael. What an interesting icon you have on you. I was surprised I found out that Steven worked on Billy Dilly. I wonder what the story behind that is, because Steve was never credited for any of the episodes.
Yeah, that's because I only ever worked on the pitch material. The creator of Billy Dilly was Aaron Springer, brilliant cartoonist, and he knew, I don't know, he knew my work from just 1,000 years of we've been in the business forever, and he wanted my cleanup line. He liked my cleanup line. We knew each other particularly from the Mickey Mouse Shorts program, and so he wanted that cleanup line on his pitch materials. But that's the only other thing I ever did for Aaron.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Hold on, I thought I got rid of it. Okay. Our good buddy Rand Hoppy. What up, Hoppy? Hoppy go lucky. Hello from Hoboken, majestic Hoboken, New Jersey.
Oh, I'm dying again.
Have you had interesting contact with some of the older generation creators while at DC in your youth?
Oh, Randy must know this stuff. Yeah, he probably remembers me telling this. My favorite, immediately what comes to mind is I met Frank Giacoia, who most people recognize. He was a masterful inker. I had a lovely chat with Frank Giacoia once when I was a kid. I did get to talk to Sheldon Meyer, the creator of Scribbly and practically the creator of DC Comics. And Sugar and Spike. And one of my favorite stories about Sheldon, I think the last time I spoke to him, actually, we were having a lovely chat on the phone. And he was great. He was a great mentor, and he's chatting, and suddenly he's quiet. And I'm like wondering why he's quiet. And he was outside as if we were on the phone, and he goes, "Listen, the birds." And I didn't hear the birds, but I thought that was lovely. I just thought that was the loveliest moment. I met Chad Grothkopf, the creator of Hoppy the Marvel Bunny for Grand, and that was great. I was one of those people who knew their names. I loved the history of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the ones that come to mind. I'll think of more afterwards, but I'll email you, Rand.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Rand. Next, we have Alejandro. Alejandro asks, "What's your go-to favorite animation ever, Steven? For 1, high-level animated action, and 2, high-level character expression." No pressure.
I can answer the second one. High-level character expressions. Great Piggy Bank Robbery by Bob Clampett. I was trying to approximate them today for something I was doing. I can't. Whether it's Bob Clampett or Rod Scribner or Robert McKimson, his 2 primary animators, like that's stuff the best expressions ever. High-level animated action. I'm not really an action guy so much, despite the fact that I work on Primal. But I will say, Genndy's action scenes are awesome to me, because I've worked on a lot of action shows, and the difference is that Genndy understands the timing. Genndy is an animator. He doesn't do the board and send it off for somebody else to time it. He doesn't just send it off to an animation studio to time it. And when he sends it off to the animation studio, he's going to redo it anyway. So Genndy has a phenomenal sense of timing. Genndy's the only guy I ever saw get Kirby bubbles right. Some character was flaming out of their head. It was perfect. It was amazing. I couldn't believe how good Genndy's. It's split-second timing, and it moves beautifully. So those Genndy action and adventure.
I love it. Thank you. Thanks, Alejandro, and thanks, Steven. We got a couple more, but I'm loving how you're handling this.
Sure.
Our good buddy Tom Zoller. Everybody knows America's Tom Zoller. Hello, Tom. Thanks for watching. What print books do you have that you're proud of / I should get? This is the first I'm hearing of Instant Piano. Tom, what an education you have in front of you.
Well, I'm sorry. Should I go?
Yeah.
Well, you should get my graphic novel, Lucky in Love, which the first volume came out along 2010. The second volume was supposed to come out in 2013. I'm still working on it, so don't get that one yet. But you could go anywhere and you'll find it in the corner, all dusty, in a secondhand bookstore. That was a labor of love. I don't know that my storytelling was as good as it could have been back then, but the drawing was exactly what I wanted to do. Instant Piano, I keep wondering why nobody has reprinted Instant Piano. I keep wondering why we haven't gone back and done more. There's all the lawsuits have been settled, and I'm not with Yoko anymore, so it's okay.
We're putting the band back together.
Yeah, if you can find Instant Piano, it had some laughs in it. It was a pretty good book.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Tom. And we have a couple more from our new viewer, Daria. And I'm not going to put them all on because there's a deluge, but I'm trying. This is a good one. Steven, can you talk about how your production crew for Symbionic Titan decided to have Ayana change outfits for every episode? It's quite a task with that many redresses.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Genndy had the edict when I started on Symbionic Titan was he wanted all of the background characters to look particular. They couldn't be generic. Nobody was generic. Everybody had to look like background characters had to look like they were real characters. They had to look like they had personalities and lives. And so, yeah, she just had to change outfit. I mean, it wasn't even me. It was the boards I got. I don't even know if I'd gotten the storyboards and it wasn't indicated. I might have just put her in the same dress, but it was always like, this is how she's dressed this episode or this scene. Because it was, specifics are really important to Genndy.
Yeah, awesome.
But that's a good question.
Also, Steven, I noticed you changed Melinda's face in development for Unicorn. What made you want to do the Betty Boop influence later in previs?
Oh, you know what? I know the answer to this because I've been wondering this myself. It was Genndy. It was Genndy. It wasn't me. I swear to God. Yeah, because her turnaround, her face looks different. I always knew I was going to go for a Betty Boop thing. But in my mind, there's like a 1970s Orestes Calpini drawing of Betty Boop where he updated her. She looks like she's still dressed the same, but she looks more like a Hanna-Barbera influence drawing than anything else. And it's a beautiful drawing. It's just lovely. And that was in my head. I always knew I wanted to use Betty Boop as a model. But as the storyboards came, I was working from Genndy's drawings, so blame Genndy.
I love it.
It wasn't me. Awesome. But they were good drawings. I did wonder why I got so far away from that model, though.
Awesome. Those are great questions. Thanks so much, and I hope that you hang around. And
I think that's also something that happens as characters move along. They change.
Yeah.
We draw them the first 50 times, and then the second 200 times, and then people see what other people did,
Yeah.
right? Like you see, like Genndy sees something that you did, and then you see something that Genndy did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why you have model sheets too. I don't know. You know, you put things on model. I don't know. Yeah. Well, you know, I've been fortunate in that I've worked on shows where the model didn't matter so much as just a good drawing. So everything was always about a good drawing rather than it looking exactly. And I didn't last very long in those shows that everything had to look like the model. So, but yeah, so I followed Gendy's drawings, and she did evolve.
Yeah.
Mike, let's go home, but let's leave Stephen with maybe one more good question.
I just had one more thing. You know, you and I both worked on it's talking about Indian burial ground. We worked on the latest incarnation of Ren and Stimpy, which you told me you heard that they actually finished the season, but it was like a year ago they let me and everybody go.
Right.
And then I guess they restarted it, but I've noticed that it never actually announced the show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about all I know, you know. Did you have any problem? This is so inside baseball, but did you have any problem getting your tax form from them?
No, actually, I got my tax form from them. Well, you were freelance, right?
Yeah.
I was on staff.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that might actually be the reason.
Okay.
But yeah, so, but yeah, I did all this development, and then I, was the background guy. And then I read something about them sending it over to the Philippines. So I have no idea. The producer was going to call me back like almost a year ago. And yeah, so it's weird.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe they went in an entirely different direction. I have no idea. The reason I asked about the tax form was that's how I found out that I think they'd finished the season, because I did not get my tax form. And so finally I wrote to them and I was like, hey, did you guys ever do anything with the show? Whatever happened? Are you working? And they're like, yeah, we just finished it. And I was like, oh, cool. Oh, that's really cool. Good for you.
Because I still have, I remember seeing, it seemed like you were like the pinch hitter. They'd bring you in and you do like these really cool drawings of special character drawings of, I remember one of like Ren holding like the 10 Commandments or something like that. Whatever,
Yeah, he was holding up log. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it'll be sort of interesting because, I mean, that's another thing that's happening now is they just bury shows. They will just do a whole season of something and just go, nah, just for tax purposes or whatever.
Tax write-off. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's airing in the Philippines. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. And when I first heard about it, I was like, well, why are they doing that? Why do we need that? We don't need it. But Bill was working on it and Bob Jakes was working on it. And I was like, I didn't know you worked on it, Mike, but I was like, yeah, sure. If they're doing it, I'll do it. I'll do a couple things. I thought, I'll do anything for fun. And I thought it would be fun. And then it just stopped. So it was like, okay, well, I'm used to that. That makes sense. If it's Ren and Stimpy, of course it's going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's just sort of interesting because it seems like, well, we own these characters. They are still popular, so there's still some value. So we got to try to wring some more out of these characters, but it sort of seems like it's kind of on the Indian burial ground kind of a thing,
Yeah, they're wrong. Those characters have been wrung out. In my opinion, they've been wrung out and hung up to dry, and they've been folded and put away. There's nothing. Those poor characters have nothing left to give, and they've given so much already. let them rest in peace. I say.
Let him go to the cartoon retirement home.
Totally. I mean, Bob and Bill and John probably 1,000 times over. They killed those characters already. They've been dead so many times. I mean, Bob buried him, Bill buried him. They've met their maker.
So what's on your board now? I mean, I guess you guys haven't gotten a renewal for the second season of Unicorn yet. So
No.
What are you working on now?
Right now I'm working on something for Sony. Something trying to see what you can do with the Hotel Transylvania property. Excuse me. So I'm working on that, something with that, and I'm working. What else am I working on? Oh, there's a Porky Daffy movie coming.
Oh.
I don't know if that's. I hope I'm not. You might have to cut that. I don't know, but I think it's known. There's a Porky and Daffy movie that my friends have been working on, and so I just. I was given the crowd scenes because I love difficult, I love terrible experiences. So,
So is it 2D or 3D?
It's 2D.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And very, very old school looking. So what else am I working on? And there's a little bit of a dip in the business right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So that's a little weird. I've experienced some dips, but I've never experienced anything like this. And so it's a little weird. I feel grateful that I have stuff, but it's not as much as I'm used to working at the moment. And so, but I'm trying to draw for myself. I'm trying to draw some comics. As I said, Lucky in Love Part 2 was supposed to come out in 2013, and it's 10 years later, and it still hasn't come out. And I still need to work on that, and I am working on it. And and in other moments, I'm working on some other things, trying to feel out my storytelling chops and how I can make them better. It's a great feeling knowing that you could still learn. Ossifying isn't where it's at. At some point, you think like, well, I know this. I could just do this. Like, it's fine. I'll just do it. But it's humbling to go back and look at something and say, what the fuck was I thinking? What is this? This doesn't work at all. This doesn't read. I don't know what this is. But that's also, like they say, it's corny, but it's learning moments. That's mistakes is how we learn. So it's kind of cool to think about storytelling right now.
I love it. All right, wonderful. Stephen, we're gonna let you go. As I like to say at the end of the show, we're gonna let you go pee now. So
okay.
All right. Well, let's end the show first.
Yeah. I was actually going to lightbox a Jeep myself.
So, on our way out, our good buddy James has put a question in, and I just want to ask you how you want to answer this. What do you call yourself nowadays? Because we all talked about titles and like all the kind of butterflying you've done in your career. What would you call yourself these days?
What do I professionally? What do I refer? I'm a cartoonist.
Yes, I love it.
I'm a cartoonist. I've always called myself a cartoonist.
There's no other answer, I think.
There's no other answer. I'm a cartoonist.
Stephen, you've been a fantastic guest. I would love to have you back. I always say this too. Where does the time go? I hope this
told you, time flies.
Flowed really well for you. Stephen,
I had a blast.
Thank you. Besides your Insta, do you have any other places online you'd like to plug?
Do I? No. Not really. You know what? I'm going to anti-plug something. Okay. Don't go to Genndy still pings me on this, and it's like, don't do that. There's DeSTEFANO on Instagram. I screwed up the password one day. I can't get back in. I've written 1,000 times. They won't let me back in. Please don't go to DeSTEFANO and look at that and write me there. It's dead as far as I know. It hasn't been hacked. It's just dead.
Mm-hmm.
So no, but DeSTEFANO is the place to go. And it's no, but DeSTEFANO, because I always say no, but that's how I phrase everything to friends. So it's no, but DeSTEFANO on Instagram. And that's probably the best place to find me these days.
I love it. Cool. Thank
Chock
you.
full
Thank
of
you.
art.
Thank you so
What's
much.
that?
Say it again, Mike. What?
I said it's chock full of art.
That's right.
Oh,
Art, yeah.
it's a heavenly Insta.
So, all right, I'm going to give a shout out for next week's guest, and maybe Stephen, you'll pop in and check it out. Guys, we're in for a treat. We had a great time tonight, but the sands of time must move on. Next week, Sean Gordon Murphy's going to be here. Ooh, man, I can't wait. And again, let's give a round of applause for Stephen. You're fantastic. We do a thing on our way out of here. So I hope you'll join us in saying goodnight. Guys, we'll be back here next Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST with another fantastic guest. But even if we're out of the pandemic, I'm still not sure. Do me a favor, you guys. Make sure you wash those Kirby hands. Let's see some good Kirby hands, Steven. There you go. Get some guys foreshortening up there. There you go. Oh, I like that. Got a little.
I was doing my Ditko.
Little Ditko, yeah.
Yeah,
guys,
do my Ditko.
do your Ditko, and then go to bed. All right, thank you guys. We'll see you next week.